Hello and welcome to the ACMG tutorials. Today we're going to be talking about the player movement. I know this is what everybody's been waiting for and we are finally here. So in the last tutorial we created a menu system, and I kind of took it a little bit step further and did what I told you guys about the whole exiting a game, and I went ahead and animated it, did the whole hover effects and all that stuff, so it's there and working. And in case you did it as well, because I figured, that's a good step to take, the pressed event, when you create the code for that, instead of changing it to go to a room, all you do is you type in game underscore end, open parenthesis, close parenthesis, and that will actually shut down the game itself. So you don't go, to the player's room and it's like, oh my gosh, why is this not working? But that's all you have to change. So let's go ahead and jump into the player's object and let's get him moving on the screen. Now, there are so many different ways to move the player. You can use, the different motion techniques. You can use the X and Y values, if you want to do grid-based movement, whatever you want to do. And for the sake of simplicity, let's explore a few of them actually, but we're going to start out with a simple, changing the X and Y values based on the key that is being pressed. And for the sake of gamers out there, we're going to use WASD rather than the arrow keys. And if you're not familiar with the WASD, it's just a really good setup hand placement for any type of game using a mouse and keyboard. Otherwise, if it's just the keyboard, mouse keys are fine, and then you can use all the left keys for skills and abilities. But WASD is a really good habit to get into if you're doing like action games and stuff. Otherwise, you can use arrow keys, and all these can be changed just using the key press event. So we're going to do a key press event, and if you want to do the arrow keys, you got left, right, up, down, but we're going to go further down into the letters, and this gives us all the letters from the keyboard. And even further, if you wanted to use a keypad, those are there too, but I wouldn't recommend it because not everybody has a keypad, especially if they're on a laptop. So let's start off by getting the player to move up. And this is going to be the W key press event. So when W is pressed, we need to move the player. So let's drag a code block into the actions, and we want to move the player up. And to do this using the X and Y values, remember the diagram back way when I made the X and Y's? Well, I'm not going to show you again, but this is how we are going to move the player. The y-axis is up and down, the x-axis is left and right. So we want the player to move up. And to move the player up, the object actually has a keyword called y. And this is the y location of this object. And so we're going to do y minus equals, and this minus equals makes it relative to the player. And then we're just going to do 3. And from my knowledge, this should be really choppy. If you did minus, but we will find out. Click on our new game. And honestly, I can't really tell if the player's moving because, silly me, we don't have anything to tell us that the player is moving. Okay, this way we can kind of get an idea. Alright. As you can see, when the key is pressed, my player moves. Now, it's choppy, so let's change this press W key by right-clicking and hit changing event, and let's do on keyboard. Instead of key press or key release, let's do keyboard, and we're going to click on the W key. So this is when the key can be held down rather than just being pressed once and only registering the press. This is going to register that being down the whole time. And when I let go, he's actually going to keep moving, and I'll show you how to set it up so that he stops moving when you release that key. So if you hold it, you can see him moving. Oh, I guess it works. I'll be darned. this is only when the key is being held down, so that works out perfectly. I guess that has changed since I have messed with this. I use a lot of motion scripting and stuff like that with friction and all that fun stuff. So let's go ahead and make the player move down. So keyboard, and let's go to letters, and it's going to be the S key. And heck, let's just go back to the W key, click on the execute piece of code, let's Control C, and then go back to the S key and go to the actions and Control V, and let's just do Y plus 3. And we should probably change our comment to move the player down. I tend to do that a lot. I'll do a lot of copying and pasting because as a programmer, you want to try to cut corners and stuff, and my comments will probably not make sense in some of my games. So you got to make sure you focus on that. So let's run the game, and we should be able to move up and down. So new game, we got up and we got down. Both work beautifully. And if you feel like you can do the left and right, gosh, feel free. That's, stop this tutorial now and just go do that. And then come back because I want to show you guys some directional stuff so that you can change your player's direction to face the way that he's going. So make sure you come back and check out the rest of the tutorial if you do the rest of this by yourself. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just be quiet a little bit and just create the next ones. So we're going to create the left, which is A. And then instead of changing the Y, we need to change the X. And since we're moving left, it's going to be a negative value of 3. And again, my comments. And then lastly, we're going to do the keyboard for D, which is right. Change it to X plus 3. And there you go. Now, if you've come back from creating your own events, what I did is I just added the A and D keys to go left and right, and those values on the X axis. So let's jump in and test our game out. And we got left, and we got right, and we got up, and we got down. Everything worked just fine. So as you can see, we can move around the player, and the reason why I add the objects is so we can see if I'm actually moving. Otherwise, it'd just be this gray space and wouldn't make any sense at all. Alright, now that we got the player moving, the cool thing is we need him to actually face that direction. And so there is a really cool keyword called direction. And we want it to be facing his angle. And let's go ahead and change the image angle to match direction. So the keyword image angle, and this is going to actually directly affect the player's sprite, we want it to be facing the direction. So when he's facing up, we want the image angle to equal 90. And this should face him up. Now mind you, I might have to come back in here and change this to 270 if it's the wrong direction because of the way the axes are set up. And so I just want to test this. Okay, it worked. And obviously we don't have anything set up for the other directions. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back in here and we're going to copy that whole line because it's kind of generic code. And we're going to do it for the down, which is going to be 270. And then we want to change it for the right, which is actually going to be 0, which is the angle we're facing now. And then for left, we want it to go 180 degrees the other way. So if we play test this, it should have all directions covered. If not, darn. Alright, so we got D, which is right, so he's facing right. We got A, which is facing left. W, facing up. And S, facing down. And so our player has direction and motion. And if you hold down 2 keys at one time, he'll go in those directions. So we got everything covered. Alright, cool. Now, you want to go further and you want to customize your player, you go right ahead. And let's say you want to add a variable for speed. So this is how fast the player goes. This will make it so you can change it later on. You can make him stun, you can make him sprint, you can make him fly across the screen, whatever you want to do. So using this, the x and y values, we can go ahead and create a new variable for speed. So I'm just going to call them play variables. And we're going to create one for speed. Now, there is a keyword called speed, and this is not what we want. We want how fast this player is moving based on the x and y values, and the speed variable literally changes how fast this player is going. And you remember how I talked about how when you hold down the key and you should have to tell it that, you know, what happens when you let go as well. Well, that would be using the speed variables. And so x and y is great for, you know, just simple movement. The speed can be used to determine collision hits. You know, if it's going a certain speed, you know, then you can take damage while falling, that kind of thing. So the speed is very helpful when it comes to that. You can do friction, you know, whatever. And gravity as well. Now, with the x and y, it's super simple and easy to change all of the locations. There's less programming involved, and it's just really a basic movement system. So whenever we do this, we want to do p speed. And remember how everything's set to 3? This should move the player in the same direction. So I'm just going to copy p speed. I'm going to go to each of these button presses and change the 3 to p speed, the 3 to p speed, and again, and again, and the player should move in each direction at the speed of 3 still. Okay, so he's moving around in the speed of 3. So now, instead of going through and changing all those again, all we have to do is change this p speed. So we're going to change it to 6. Now he's like Superman. He's going really fast. So as you can see, that was very simple. Very, very simple. And you can customize it in many ways. So let's show you an example of that. Let's go ahead and add another variable for p sprint. Actually, this is going to be a Boolean. So sprinting equals false. And this is, we're going to use a new variable, and it's going to be a Boolean. So we're going to do an if check. If you don't feel comfortable jumping into learning, you know, a new little bit of code here, then you can go ahead and close this tutorial and move on to the next one. But what this one does, I mean, it's simple. It's still, you know, it can be named whatever you want, but instead of using like a number or a string, we're just going to use true or false. And then we will be checking whether or not this variable is true or false based on the player's button presses. So when you add an event, we're going to go to keyboard and we're going to have shift to sprint. So when you hold shift, we want the player to speed up. So we're going to change the p speed equal to 6. And this will simulate the player sprinting. Now when the shift key is released, so on key release, shift, we're going to make a new code block and we're going to stop the player from sprinting. And then we're going to change, oh my gosh, you know what, technically we don't even need, we don't even need an if check on this. So, you know, forget I even said that. So we don't need the Boolean. We can save that for a later day. So make the p speed back to 3 when it's released. So forget anything I said about the Boolean. We actually don't need to get into that. So I apologize if you stopped watching. I mean, you're not watching now, but if you did stop watching and you came back, I feel terrible. Anyways, so when you press the shift key, your speed should be 6. When it's released, it goes back to 3. Simple enough. Let's click on new game. Alright, so we got the player just, you know, la-di-da. And when we hold down shift, he's like, I'm super fast. And we let go, and he's nice and slow. So like I said, that's that was a little bit easier than I had imagined, and I apologize if we thought it was going to be difficult together. So you can use those variables to change the player's speed, and that is only just touching the surface. Now, like I said, with the whole Boolean deal, you can use that to check if the player's sprinting, then they can't perform other actions, that kind of thing. Now, we'll actually get into that if statement stuff later on when we're creating a game. Actually, when we're creating collision and enemies and stuff like that. So it's not too soon, but it's right around the corner. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, but that is how you get your player to move around on the screen, and I look forward to our next tutorial together. See you guys later.